They said humans were nothing special, just another species among thousands, barely worth a seat at the Galactic Council table. The Zephyrians with their crystalline intellect, the Vorthan Empire with their military might, the ancient Ethereals with their mystical powers. These were the powers that shaped the galaxy. Humans. They were the newcomers, the diplomatic mediators, the ones who brought coffee and compromise to every meeting. But when humanity announced they were leaving the galaxy entirely, the Council learned a terrifying truth. They hadn't been managing galactic civilization for the past century. Humanity had been managing them. Now, with human ships disappearing beyond the galactic rim and their final message echoing through every communications network, good luck. You'll need it. The galaxy's greatest powers are about to discover what happens when the species they underestimated takes their invisible hand off the wheel of civilization. The economic systems are failing. Ancient enemies are mobilizing for war. Trade routes that seem naturally stable are collapsing overnight. And in the council chambers where humanity's empty chair sits like an accusation, the galaxy's rulers are beginning to realize they never understood the true scope of human influence, or what they're about to lose. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective stared at the empty chair in the council chamber, his crystalline form refracting the ambient light into nervous patterns. The chair had been empty for exactly 72 standard hours, and already the galaxy was showing signs of strain that none of them had anticipated. The Terran delegation has officially withdrawn from all galactic affairs, announced High Counselor Zerdich, her ethereal voice carrying the weight of growing concern. Their final transmission was brief. The massive view screen activated, displaying the last message from Earth government. The face of Secretary General Chan Martinez appeared, looking tired but resolute. His words have been playing on repeat across every major news network in the galaxy. To our friends and colleagues in the Galactic Council, Martinez began, humanity has decided to pursue opportunities beyond this galaxy. We appreciate our time working together, but we've concluded that our future lies elsewhere. All human colonies, ships, and installations will be evacuated within the next standard month. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Good luck. You'll need it. The transmission ended there, and Martinez's final expression, something between pity and amusement, had haunted Kethvar's thoughts ever since. Good luck. You'll need it, rumbled General Thok of the Vorthan Empire, his massive frame causing the specialized chair to creak. Arruganumans. They think we cannot manage without their constant meddling. Meddling? Lady Velana of the Centauri Republic raised an elegant eyebrow. Ambassador Martinez spent more time mediating our disputes than his own species. If anything, we relied too heavily on human diplomatic services. Kethvar's internal processors analyzed the situation rapidly. Humans had indeed been involved in virtually every major galactic treaty for the past 80 years. Their reputation for fairness and their strange ability to find compromise solutions had made them the de facto mediators of the galaxy. But surely that couldn't be critical to galactic stability. The economic implications concern me more, admitted Trade Minister Quindal of the Nexus Consortium, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Human commercial vessels have been disappearing from trade routes all morning. My analysts are reporting significant disruptions in cargo flow. Temporary adjustments, General Thok dismissed. Other species can fill their routes. Can they? Uyindalston is sharpened. Humans didn't just run cargo ships. They operated the majority of inter-sector banking systems, currency exchanges, and trade verification networks. My people are trying to access the galactic credit transfer system, and it's not responding properly. Kethvar felt a chill run through his crystalline matrix. He accessed his own financial systems and found the same problem. The smooth, nearly invisible network that had facilitated galactic commerce for decades was beginning to stutter and fail. Surely they didn't take critical infrastructure with them, High Counselor Zerdich said, but uncertainty colored her normally confident voice. They're taking everything, reported Intelligence Director Clarkson, his insectoid features clicking with agitation. Every human ship, every human station, every human citizen, even the mixed-species facilities with significant human populations are being evacuated. It's the most organized mass migration in galactic history. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humans weren't just leaving. They were extracting themselves completely from galactic civilization. Kethvar began running calculations, cross-referencing human involvement in galactic infrastructure. What he found made his light patterns dim with worry. Humans had their fingers in virtually everything, but so subtly that their involvement had become invisible. They didn't control galactic civilization. They maintained it. The KRYL sector conflict has reignited, reported military liaison Vextar, her scaled features showing confusion. The ceasefire that's held for 12 years just ended. Both sides claim the other violated terms, but our monitoring stations show no violations occurred. How is that possible? General Thok demanded. The human observers who've been stationed there since the treaty signing left this morning, Vextar explained. Apparently, their presence was the only thing keeping both sides honest. Without neutral monitors they both trusted, the ceasefire collapsed within hours. Similar reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. The Epsilon trade war had resumed as automated trade systems failed without human oversight. 3 different territorial disputes in the Outer Rim had exploded into open conflict as human peacekeepers departed. Even the seemingly stable alliance between the aquatic tribes and the desert kingdoms was showing strain as their human cultural liaisons vanished. This is impossible, General Thok insisted, though his voice carried less conviction than before. One species cannot be this integral to galactic functioning. We managed fine before humans arrived, did we? Lady Valana asked quietly. When humans first joined the Council 80 years ago, how many active wars were there? How many trade disputes? How many diplomatic crises? Kethvar accessed historical records with growing dread. 80 years ago, the galaxy had been in constant turmoil. Wars, trade conflicts, territorial disputes, and diplomatic breakdowns had been the norm rather than the exception. The period after human integration had been remembered as an age of unprecedented peace and prosperity. They didn't cause the peace, Kethvar whispered, his realization dawning like a supernova. They were the peace. What do you mean? High Counselor Zerath asked. Look at the data. Kethvar projected his findings onto the main display. Every major galactic treaty in the past 8 decades has human signatures. Every trade agreement has human verification systems. Every diplomatic protocol includes human mediation procedures. Every peacekeeping force includes human observers. We didn't notice because they made themselves indispensable gradually, quietly, without fanfare. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as the council members began to grasp the scope of their problem. The Galactic Communications Network is experiencing severe delays, reported Communications Officer Nexon, bursting into the chamber. Human relay stations are going offline in sequence as their ships depart. We're losing real-time communication with 17 sectors. The agricultural distribution system is failing, added another aide, rushing in behind Nexon. Human cargo vessels carried 60% of food shipments between agricultural and population centers. Famine could begin within weeks in densely populated systems. The Stellar Navigation Network is compromised, reported yet another messenger. Human survey ships maintain the most accurate star charts and navigation beacons. Ships are already reporting navigation errors in rarely traveled regions. The reports kept coming, each one revealing another critical system that humans had quietly maintained. They hadn't controlled galactic civilization through force or political dominance. They had made themselves irreplaceable through competence, reliability, and an almost supernatural ability to keep complex systems running smoothly. General Thok's massive frame seemed to shrink as the reality hit him. They weren't subjects in our empire. We were components in their machine. No, Lady Valana corrected softly. We were partners in their vision. They never dominated us. They enabled us. And now, they're leaving us to manage on our own. High Counselor Zerth finished. The question is, can we? As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the council chamber. Emergency lights bathed the assembly in crimson warning. Report, Zerth commanded. The hegemony fleet is mobilizing toward Nexus space, announced the military aide, his voice tight with panic. The Nexus Defense Force is responding in kind. Both sides are citing trade violations, but our diplomatic channels are too disrupted to verify claims or mediate. Give me a direct line to both fleets, General Thok ordered. Impossible, sir. The communication delays are too severe for real-time diplomacy. By the time our messages reach them and return, they'll either be at war or the crisis will have resolved itself. Then, send ships to mediate directly. With what authority? Lady Velana asked pointedly. Human mediators were accepted because both sides trusted their neutrality. Who will both the hegemony and the Nexus trust now? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. For 80 years, humans have been the galaxy's neutral arbiters, the species that every other species could trust to be fair. Without them, every mediation would be suspect, every negotiation poisoned by the assumption that the mediator favored one side or another. Kethvar watched the tactical display as two massive fleets converged on what had been a peaceful trade route just hours before. Similar confrontations were developing across the galaxy as the invisible infrastructure of human mediation collapsed. Trade disputes became trade wars. Territorial disagreements became military standoffs. Cultural misunderstandings became diplomatic crises. We need to contact them, he said suddenly. The humans. We need to convince them to stay, or at least to help us transition more gradually. They've already gone, Intelligence Director Clockson reported grimly. The last human ship left the galactic rim 20 minutes ago. Their entire species, billions of individuals, thousands of colonies, millions of ships, have vanished into intergalactic space. But why? General Thok demanded, his military mind struggling with the incomprehensible tactical withdrawal. What threat could drive an entire species to abandon the galaxy? Maybe there was no threat, suggested Lady Velana. Maybe they simply outgrew us. The idea was almost too vast to comprehend. A species that had become so advanced, so capable, that they viewed the entire galaxy as too small for their ambitions. A people who had spent 80 years patiently managing galactic civilization, not because they needed to, but because they felt obligated to help lesser species learn to coexist. Their final message, Kethvar said slowly. They didn't say goodbye to colleagues or allies. They wished us luck in our future endeavors, like teachers leaving students to manage on their own. Then, we'll manage, High Counselor Zerth declared, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. We survived before humans arrived. We'll survive after they leave. But, even as she spoke, new alarms sounded throughout the chamber. The galaxy's first full day without human stewardship was degenerating into chaos faster than anyone had imagined possible. And, somewhere beyond the galactic rim, human ships continued their journey toward destinations that the galaxy's remaining species couldn't even comprehend. The age of human guidance was over. The age of galactic chaos was about to begin. 3 weeks had passed since the last human ship disappeared beyond the galactic rim, and the galaxy was unraveling faster than anyone had thought possible. Ambassador Kethvar stood in what had once been the Council's most prestigious meeting hall, now converted into a crisis management center. Holographic displays surrounded him, each one showing a different catastrophe in progress. The Hegemony Nexus war had spread to encompass 7 star systems. What should have been a minor trade dispute had escalated when neither side could agree on neutral arbiters. Both factions demanded mediators from species they considered friendly, but every suggested species was rejected by the other side. Without humans to provide genuinely neutral mediation, the diplomatic process had collapsed entirely. Casualty reports from the Kepler front, announced military coordinator Vextar, her reptilian features showing exhaustion. The hegemony's third fleet engaged Nexus forces near the mining stations. 17 ships destroyed, 3 stations severely damaged. Thousands dead. General Thok studied the tactical displays with growing frustration. Deploy the peacekeeping fleet to separate the combatants. Which species' peacekeeping fleet? Vextar asked pointedly. The Zephyrians refused to operate alongside Vorthan forces after the navigation incident last week. The Centauri ships won't enter the same sector as ethereal vessels since their crews experienced psychic interference from ethereal meditation practices. And both the hegemony and Nexus have declared that any intervention by species they consider biased will be treated as an act of war. Kethvar processed this information with growing despair. Humans hadn't just mediated between enemy species, they had mediated between allied species. Their presence had somehow made it possible for the galaxy's diverse races to work together despite fundamental incompatibilities in biology, psychology, and culture. What about the automated peacekeeping protocols? Suggested Trade Minister Quindal. Surely we can deploy neutral robotic forces. The automated systems require verification codes, Intelligence Director Clarkson explained with clicking frustration. Codes that were held exclusively by human diplomatic staff. We've tried to bypass the security, but human encryption is surprisingly sophisticated. Our best analysts estimate it could take years to crack their systems. Lady Velana approached one of the economic displays, her elegant features marred by worry. The food crisis is accelerating. Agricultural worlds are producing normally, but the distribution network is failing. Human cargo vessels didn't just carry food, they coordinated the entire logistics network. Without their routing algorithms and supply chain management, agricultural products are rotting in warehouses while populations starve. Can't we simply reprogram the logistics systems? Asked High Counselor Zartish. We've tried, Quindal admitted. But human logistics aren't just about moving cargo from point A to point B. They managed an incredibly complex web of supply and demand across thousands of worlds, adjusting for seasonal variations, political instability, cultural preferences, dietary restrictions, and dozens of other factors. Their systems learned and adapted continuously. Ours don't. The displays showed the results of their attempts to replace human logistics. Vegetarian species were receiving meat shipments. Desert worlds were getting Arctic fish. Highly populated industrial centers were receiving luxury goods, while their basic food needs went unmet. The chaos was both tragic and absurd. The cultural exchange program has collapsed entirely, reported Lady Velana. We're seeing a resurgence of xenophobia across multiple species. The aquatic tribes have closed their borders to all air-breathing species, claiming we contaminate their sacred waters. The crystalline collectives are refusing all contact with biological species, calling us impure organic matter. Kethvar accessed the relevant data streams and felt his light patterns dim with distress. For decades, human cultural liaisons had worked tirelessly to bridge the gaps between radically different species. They had learned everyone's languages, customs, taboos, and traditions, then helped other species do the same. Without their patient translation, not just of words, but of entire worldviews, the galaxy species were retreating into isolation and suspicion. The Epsilon Rebellion has spread to 4 sectors, added Vextar. Without human observer forces to monitor the colonial treaties, the indigenous populations claim their rights are being violated. The colonial governments insist they're following all protocols, but there's no trusted third party to verify either claim. Send our own observers, General Thok suggested. We tried. The Epsilon rebels reject Vorthan observers, claiming we're biased toward military solutions. They reject Zephyrian observers, claiming we're too logical to understand biological emotions. They reject ethereal observers, claiming psychic species can't be trusted not to manipulate thoughts. They reject everyone except humans. Kethvar finished. who are no longer here. The irony was devastating. Humans had spent 80 years building trust with every species in the galaxy, becoming the one race that everyone else considered genuinely impartial. Now that trust had become a weapon turned against the remaining galactic civilization. Communications Officer Nexon entered the crisis center, his 6 arms carrying multiple data tablets. "The Outer Rim territories are declaring independence," he announced. 17 systems have formally withdrawn from the Galactic Council, claiming we've lost the authority to govern effectively. "They can't do that," protested High Counselor Zertich. "The Colonial Charter clearly states, the Colonial Charter requires enforcement." Nexon interrupted respectfully. Enforcement that relied heavily on human diplomatic pressure and economic leverage. Without human trade networks and mediation services, our authority exists only on paper. General Thok's massive fists clenched. "Then, we enforce our authority militarily." "With whose military?" Vextar asked. "The Vorthan Empire controls the largest fleet, but deploying it would convince every other species that we're staging a military coup. The other council races would unite against us. Meanwhile, human-maintained defense networks are failing across the galaxy. 17 sectors have lost their early warning systems. 9 trade routes have become unsafe due to navigation beacon failures." Lady Velana accessed her personal communication systems and frowned. "I'm receiving reports of increasing mental health crises among multiple species. Apparently, human psychologists and counselors were providing services throughout the galaxy. They specialize in interspecies mental health issues, problems that arise when different psychological frameworks interact. Without their expertise, we're seeing mass psychological breakdowns." The scope of human integration into galactic society was becoming clearer with each passing hour. They hadn't just been mediators and traders. They had been teachers, therapists, engineers, administrators, and countless other professions that kept civilization functioning. Their departure hadn't just removed one species from the galactic community. It had removed the connective tissue that held the community together. "The research networks are collapsing," reported a new aide, rushing into the center. Human scientists weren't just conducting their own research. They were facilitating collaboration between other species. Cross-species research projects are failing as communication barriers resurface and trust breaks down. Kethvar reviewed the scientific databases with growing alarm. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization might have been their gift for collaboration. While other species excelled in specific areas, Zephyrian mathematics, Vorthan engineering, ethereal energy manipulation, humans had excelled at bringing different types of intelligence together to solve problems none could address alone. "There has to be a way to contact them," insisted High Counselor Zartich. "They can't have simply vanished. No species abandons an entire galaxy without leaving some means of communication." Intelligence Director Clockson's mandibles clicked with agitation. "We've tried every communication method available. Standard subspace radio reaches empty space beyond the galactic rim. Quantum entanglement networks to human colonies show no response. Even ethereal psychic probes detect nothing. It's as if they've simply ceased to exist, or moved beyond our ability to detect them," suggested Lady Velana quietly. "We always assumed human technology was roughly equivalent to our own. What if we were wrong?" The implications of that suggestion sent chills through the assembled leaders. Humanity had always seemed like one advanced species among many, notable mainly for their diplomatic skills and cultural adaptability. But their seamless integration into every aspect of galactic civilization, their ability to maintain impossibly complex systems with apparent ease, their mysterious capacity for neutral mediation. What if these hadn't been cultural traits, but evidence of technological and intellectual capabilities far beyond what they had revealed? "The financial systems are beyond our ability to repair," admitted Quindal, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence with distress. Human banking algorithms weren't just sophisticated, They were apparently learning systems that adapted to changing economic conditions in real time. Our attempts to replicate them have resulted in hyperinflation in 12 sectors and economic depression in 23 others. Economic warfare has broken out in the Inner Rim, added another aid. Without standardized currency exchange and trade verification, species are returning to barter systems and economic nationalism. The crystalline collectives are refusing to trade with biological species entirely, claiming our economic systems are chaotically inefficient. General Thok studied the tactical displays showing economic conflict zones. How do you fight an enemy whose weapons are market manipulation and supply chain disruption? You don't, Kethvar realized. You mediate. You negotiate. You find compromise solutions that address everyone's needs. You do what humans did. But we can't do what humans did, Lady Velana pointed out. Every species trusts themselves and distrusts everyone else. Humans were trusted because they were different somehow. They could see beyond their own species' interests. Intelligence Director Clarkson suddenly straightened, his antennae twitching with excitement. We've detected something. Long-range sensors are picking up artificial structures at the galactic rim. Massive constructions, unlike anything in our databases. The main display shifted to show sensor readings from the galaxy's edge. Enormous geometric shapes hung in the void between galaxies. Clearly artificial, but following no design principles any of the assembled species recognized. How long have those been there? Asked High Counselor Zartich. Unknown. They're positioned exactly where our long-range sensor coverage ended. If they've been there all along, we would never have detected them. But they match the trajectory of the human exodus. They're building something, whispered General Thok. An intergalactic space. Or they built something, corrected Lady Velana, and they've gone to join it. The realization hit the Council like a physical blow. Humanity's departure hadn't been an exodus or an evacuation. It had been a completion. Somewhere beyond the galaxy's edge, human civilization had been preparing for this moment for decades or centuries. The galaxy had never been their home. It had been their project. We need to get a message to them, insisted High Counselor Zartich. Whatever we did wrong, whatever caused them to leave, we can fix it. We can negotiate. Can we? Asked Kethvar quietly. What do we have to offer a species that can build structures in intergalactic space? What do we have that could convince them to return to managing our chaos when they clearly have larger ambitions? The question silenced the Council. Around them, displays showed a galaxy in accelerating collapse. Wars, famines, economic chaos, and diplomatic breakdown painted a picture of civilization returning to its pre-human state of constant conflict and inefficiency. At least we know they're out there, said Lady Velana, eventually. Perhaps they're watching. Perhaps if we prove we can learn, can grow, can become worthy of their partnership again. Or perhaps, said General Thok grimly, they've moved on to bigger things and left us to sink or swim on our own. The galaxy's first month without human guidance was drawing to a close, and the prognosis was not encouraging. But somewhere beyond the galactic rim, vast structures waited in the void, and with them, the possibility of answers that the galaxy's remaining species were only beginning to formulate the right questions to ask. 6 months had passed since humanity's departure, and Ambassador Kethvar barely recognized the galaxy anymore. The Grand Council chambers had been converted into a fortress-like command center, with blast shields covering the viewing ports and security checkpoints at every entrance. Outside, the sounds of protests and occasionally violence could be heard as various species blamed each other for the cascading crisis. The numbers were staggering. 47 active wars where there had once been peaceful trade relationships. Economic collapse affecting 60% of inhabited systems. Complete communication breakdown between entire sectors of the galaxy. The death toll was approaching the billions and showed no signs of slowing. The Zephyrian Collective is withdrawing from the Council, announced High Counselor Zerdich, her ethereal form flickering with exhaustion. They claim our emotional irrationality makes cooperation impossible. The crystalline matrices have already isolated themselves completely. The aquatic tribes won't communicate with any surface-dwelling species. General Thok's massive frame had lost much of its previous confidence. His once pristine military uniform was wrinkled and stained, reflecting the chaos of trying to maintain order without reliable allies or systems. The Vorthan fleet is stretched beyond its limits. We're fighting brushfire wars in 30 sectors simultaneously. Every time we resolve one conflict, 3 more ignite. Lady Valana approached the central display, which now showed a galaxy-wide tactical situation instead of the peaceful political boundaries it had once depicted. Red zones indicating active conflict covered nearly a third of the map. The refugee crisis has overwhelmed our capacity to respond. Entire populations are fleeing war zones, but there's no coordinated effort to resettle them. Species won't accept refugees from other species due to biological, cultural, or political incompatibilities. Kethvar processed the latest intelligence reports with growing dread. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Without humans to serve as universal translators, not just of language but of intent, culture, and basic understanding, the galaxy's species have become alien to each other again. Cooperation had been replaced by suspicion, diplomacy by threats, trade by economic warfare. "Sir," called Intelligence Director Clarkson from across the command center, his mandibles clicking with unusual excitement. "We're receiving a transmission from beyond the galactic rim. It's human." The entire command center fell silent. For 6 months, they had sent countless messages toward the mysterious structures at the galaxy's edge, receiving only silence in return. Now, finally, a response. "Put it through," ordered High Counselor Zertish. The main display flickered, then resolved into an image that made everyone present step backward. The face that appeared was human, but somehow more than human. The eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight, and the expression carried a weight of knowledge that was almost painful to witness. "Greetings, Galactic Council," the figure said, and its voice carried harmonics that resonated through dimensions they couldn't name. "I am Dr. Sarah Chun, speaking on behalf of the Human Transcendency Project. We have been observing your progress." Progress. General Thok exploded. "The galaxy is in chaos. Billions are dead. Your abandonment has destroyed everything we built together." Dr. Chin's expression didn't change, but something like sadness flickered in those cosmic eyes. "General Thok of the Vorthan Empire, you commanded 17 successful military campaigns before humanity arrived in this galaxy. Tell me, how many of those victories brought lasting peace?" The question silenced Thok immediately. Kethvar accessed historical records and found the uncomfortable truth. Before humanity, the galaxy had been locked in cycles of endless conflict. Victory led to resentment, resentment to rebellion, rebellion to new wars. Nothing had ever been truly resolved. "We needed you," Lady Valana said quietly. "Why did you leave?" "Because you needed to grow," Dr. Chen replied. "For 80 years, we served as your mediators, your administrators, your teachers, your counselors. We maintained your peace, managed your trade, resolved your conflicts, and facilitated your cooperation. But in doing so, we prevented you from learning to do these things for yourselves. So you abandoned us to teach us a lesson?" High Counselor Zerth's ethereal form blazed with anger. "We ascended to give you an opportunity," Dr. Chen corrected. "Every species in this galaxy has incredible potential. The Zephyrian's crystalline intellect can solve problems we never could. The Vorthan military efficiency, properly directed, can protect entire sectors. The ethereal understanding of consciousness transcends physical limitations. The Centauri diplomatic traditions, when genuine, create lasting bonds between peoples." "Then, why is everything falling apart?" demanded Kethvar. "Because you're trying to replicate what we did instead of discovering what you can do," Dr. Chen explained. "You're attempting to rebuild human systems with non-human minds. It will never work. You need to find your own paths to cooperation. Intelligence Director Clarkson's antennae twitched with desperate hope. Then return and teach us. Help us find those paths. For the first time, Dr. Chen's expression showed genuine emotion, a deep, cosmic sadness that seemed to encompass galaxies. We can't return, Director Clarkson. We're no longer what we were. The Human Transcendency Project was our preparation for existence beyond physical reality. We've moved past the need for individual bodies, planet-bound societies, or galaxy-limited thinking. The display shifted to show the structures at the galactic rim in greater detail. They weren't buildings or ships. They were something far more profound. Geometric forms that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, constructs that channeled forces beyond the understanding of the assembled species. We're becoming something new, Dr. Chen continued. A form of consciousness that can exist between galaxies, explore realities beyond physical space, and pursue knowledge that transcends material existence. We spent 80 years in your galaxy not as conquerors or rulers, but as students learning your final lessons before graduation. Final lessons? Whispered Lady Valana. How to help others grow without controlling them. How to teach without creating dependence. How to love without possessing. Dr. Chen's voice carried infinite gentleness. You were our teachers as much as we were yours. Every conflict we mediated taught us patience. Every trade dispute we resolved taught U.S. balance. Every cultural bridge we built taught us understanding. General Thok's massive form seemed to shrink as understanding dawned. We were your test, your final examination before whatever you've become. You were our honor, Dr. Chen corrected, our privilege to serve, our proof that growth is possible, that species can transcend their limitations, that consciousness can evolve beyond its origins. But the galaxy is dying without you, protested High Counselor Zertich. The galaxy is learning without us, Dr. Chen replied. Yes, there is chaos. Yes, there is suffering. But look deeper. In the past month, 17 new diplomatic initiatives have emerged. Species are beginning to find new ways to communicate. The aquatic tribes and the desert kingdoms established a direct cultural exchange program without human mediation. The crystalline matrices developed translation protocols that work with biological minds. Kethvar accessed the data streams and was startled to realize Dr. Chen was correct. Buried beneath the headlines of war and chaos were smaller stories of innovation, cooperation, and gradual adaptation. Species were slowly, painfully learning to work together without human guidance. The Epsilon rebels and their colonial governments reached a peace agreement last week, Dr. Chen continued, mediated entirely by Zephyrian logic matrices and ethereal empathy techniques. The trade route through Sector 7 was restored by a Vorthan Centauri Joint Task Force using military efficiency guided by diplomatic wisdom. You're finding your own solutions. At tremendous cost, Lady Valana pointed out. Yes, Dr. Chen acknowledged without flinching. Growth always costs, but consider the alternative. If we had remained, you would have continued to depend on us indefinitely. Your species would have stagnated, never developing your own capacity for cooperation, never reaching your full potential. Instead of growing into true galactic partners, you would have remained eternal children. What if we fail? Asked Kethvar quietly. What if we can't learn? What if the galaxy tears itself apart completely? Dr. Chen's cosmic eyes seemed to look directly into Kethvar's crystalline matrix. Then, you will have failed gloriously while attempting something magnificent. Better to struggle toward greatness and fail than to remain safely mediocre. But I don't believe you will fail. I've seen your potential. The transmission flickered, and Dr. Chen's form began to fade. We're moving beyond this dimensional framework now. This will be our last direct communication. But remember, we're not abandoning you. We're trusting you. We believe in your ability to become everything you're capable of being. Wait, called High Counselor Zerdich desperately. Will we ever see you again? Dr. Chen's fading image smiled with infinite warmth. When you've grown enough to exist between the galaxies as we do now, when you've learned to transcend your individual limitations and work as true partners, when you've found your own paths to peace and cooperation, then perhaps our paths will cross again. Until then, remember that somewhere in the vast spaces between stars, humanity watches with pride as our greatest students become teachers themselves. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in profound silence. For long moments, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Kethvar turned to his colleagues. She was right about the new diplomatic initiatives, and the joint task forces, and the independent peace agreements. We are finding our own solutions. Slowly, General Thok grumbled, but his voice carried less despair than before. Growth is always slow, Lady Valana observed. But perhaps that makes it more genuine. High Counselor Zartich straightened, her ethereal form brightening with new resolve. Then we continue. We learn. We grow. We prove ourselves worthy of the trust humanity placed in us. Outside the command center, the galaxy continued its chaotic transformation. Wars still raged, and economies still struggled, but now there was something else, hope. Species were beginning to find new ways to communicate, to cooperate, to coexist. The solutions weren't human solutions, but they were working solutions born from the unique perspectives and capabilities of each species. Ambassador Kethvar returned to the displays showing galactic conditions. The red zones were still there, but so were new green zones, areas where species have found their own paths to peace. Small at first, but growing, humanity had left them not as abandoned children, but as graduating students. The galaxy species were no longer dependents in someone else's civilization. They were partners in building their own. It would take time, patience, and countless difficult lessons, but perhaps that was exactly what they needed. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim, in spaces between dimensions, the consciousness that had once been humanity watched and waited, not as guardians or guides, but as proud teachers whose students were finally ready to shape their own destiny. The age of human guidance was over. The age of galactic self-determination had begun, and for the first time in 6 months, that felt like a beginning rather than an ending.